Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 1991 film Steel and Lace. Probably a lesser known one. I didn't know about it until I found out that Vinegar Syndrome put it out, watched the trailer, and was like, yeah, that looks pretty fun. And I did have a decent amount of fun with it. It's not going to get a super high rating for me. I am rating this as an overall film and as So Bad It's Good film. But neither of those are going to get really high ratings for me because it's not a great film. It does rate much better on the So Bad It's Good scale, but yeah. Obviously, it looks good with the release that Vinegar Syndrome gave it. So that is the front. For people more into the sexy side of things, there's that. And the original artwork, a little something like this. The sexy side again. Which you can tell that this film really leans heavily into that at times. Anyway, directed by Ernest Farino, who also did Monsters, Land of the Lost, some episodes of Land of the Lost. Josh Kirby, Time Warrior is the last one that I had on there. Written by Joseph Dougherty, who also wrote Cast a Deadly Spell, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, some episodes of Judging Amy, episodes of Saving Grace, episodes of Ravenswood, and more recently, Pretty Little Liars, which was a pretty popular show. Also, a writer on this one was Dave Edison, who didn't really have any other writing credits. The film has Bruce Davison in it. Might know him most recently from a smaller part in Ozark, which I just finished Ozark. Really enjoyed that one. He was also in X2, X-Men United, Apt Pupil, and Dead Man's Curve, just to name a few, because he's been in a lot. Also, David Naughton is in this one, which people know him best from An American Werewolf in London. Also in Body Bags and Ice Cream Man. Some other ones worth mentioning. And Brian Becker is in this one, who was in The Burning, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and The Money Pit. Really like him most, personally, in Fast Times at Ridgemont High as Radner. Big fan of that film. Love it, love it, love it. Anyway, let's get into the actual events of the film. The opening music is some real over-the-top corny 90s music. You can tell this was from the early to mid-90s because of that awful over-the-top music. The look of the film and the feel of that music gave me a lot of kind of vibes of TV, because that's just kind of the feeling I got, because there were a lot of films from that time that were on TV that were like that. So I'm wondering, I don't know, if this film was a film that went to television to be shown and like the gory stuff was cut out of it or not. So if anyone knows that information, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'm not sure, but it just has that feel to me, especially the way it looks cinematography wise. Yeah. Excuse me. The cutting between the assault, I'm not going to use the R word because of YouTube, but I'm just going to call it the assault. The cutting between the assault and the courtroom doesn't work that great in the beginning because these are totally different feelings to the film. They're different atmospheres that you're trying to create for the film. And to cut them together like that, like the courtroom is very boring and droll. And the assault scene is very messed up and intense and horrible. And when you're kind of going between those two things, you're missing the feeling mainly of the assault that goes on. Now, maybe that was partially intentional because they didn't want people to languish in that too much, make them feel too uncomfortable, because after that gets kind of like out of the way, the film doesn't focus on it a whole lot. I mean, it is the premise for what's going on in the film, the whole driving force for Albert, Bruce Davison's character, to be doing what he's doing with the body of his sister Gailey, making her a cyborg killer because of the assault that happened, and then she ends up committing suicide because of that. But maybe that was intentional because they didn't want you to feel it too much, because they're going to move on from it and give you a lighter feel to the film overall. But it was just this weird juxtaposition of, it's like really messed up and intense, super boring and not much going on. And I don't know. It was just weird. The law fails Gailey early on, so someone else will have to take matters into their own hands. Literally, by setting the film up the way that they did, kind of tells you someone's going to do something here. And then when you see her on the front with her blood-covered face, or even when you see the original one, and she's partially android or partially robotic, something's going on. This film seems like it reached for the whole RoboCop type thing. It's like part human, part robot, taking out scumbags. It's that. Oh, by the way, real quick, I just remembered. T-shirt shout out, the Bang Bang Bar from Twin Peaks. Love Twin Peaks. Anyway, sorry. That was very random. Very random, like the way they put that first scene together. It's obvious early on how bad this movie will be because of the acting. The acting in this was not very good. You know, even someone like David Naughton didn't do a great job. I think Bruce Davison probably did the best job in this film. But so many people around him not doing a great job. So, yeah, yeah. So you know what you're in for. Like, you know this is going to be a so bad it's good film. That's another reason the acting, where I kind of felt like it had this kind of TV movie vibe to it, especially from the early 90s, but I don't know. Again, verify. The whole car trouble scene gets right to the strong sexual tone of the film that they end up picking up on. Now, obviously, they need that strong sexual tone because it's baiting in the bad guy. And I think, who was the first bad guy? That was Craig. Craig's the first bad guy of the scumbag group of Emersons to end up being killed by Gailey, who's, you know, in disguise at this point. But there needs to be strong sexuality because it's been established that that's what drives them in. They're very sexually motivated, very predatory sexual people. And when a woman who's good looking shows up and, you know, this guy's having car trouble, which obviously Gailey was able to cause that car trouble in order to get him in her car, take him to the Love Motel, and penetrate him. Yeah. Was that the early version of pegging? That's what it kind of seemed like. But anyway, so you need that strong sexuality going on. And you know that that's going to show up a few other times in the film, and it does. You know, also the thing is, this is the early 90s. Sexuality in film sells. Hell, sexuality in film still really big time sells. So it's just a thing. The first kill scene, that one in the Love Motel I was talking about, with the huge metal contraption busting through the front of Craig, and you're seeing it come out the back of him. I love that. I think that's the coolest moment of the film. It's obviously the best death in the film. Love, love, love that scene. I'm going to look forward to that every time I end up watching this film, which won't be a ton of times, but I will watch this again for sure. It is one that I would like to show to other people because I did enjoy it enough. I had enough fun with it, so I love that. I was honestly kind of surprised that the practical effects look the way they did. And on this Blu-ray, there is a special feature where they talk to the guy. Well, it's just one big documentary feature that's almost an hour long, which is really interesting. And they kind of go over the phases of the film creation. And one of the guys they interview is the guy who was involved with doing the practical effects, and he was talking about how they pulled everything off. That's one of the coolest things in the special features, in my opinion. So for that reason, I really do think this is worth having. Moving on, it is odd that there was no scene setting up Gailey as now part machine. Now, I'm wondering if that was a budgetary constraint thing, because in the special features, they were talking about how they were on a pretty big budget constraint, which is also a reason I was pretty surprised at how they were able to do some of these kills. But you need, like, I felt like you needed a little bit of something to be like, oh, she's being turned into a machine. Although now that I think about it, you have the part later on in the film where they're showing her being worked on by Albert. Like, you know, the back of her head is off and they're doing the shots between her face and then like the back of her head with him messing around with the circuits and everything in her brain area. So they could have just moved something like that up more, but then I think part of the problem ends up being, and what they were going for is they want you to be surprised when it's revealed that the killer in the Love Motel is actually Gailey. But, you know, how many people were that surprised? I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess part of it is the cover art gives things away. Allison's boss has a terrible idea for her artwork, but it does make the excuse to get her involved in the main storyline of the film. Yeah, it didn't make any sense how she's like, okay, here's my artwork. And he's like, oh, okay, you know, that's good and all. But do you remember when you were doing pictures of people in the courtroom? Maybe what you should do is take those old courtroom pictures, find the people today and draw them today, and so you can see how they aged. That doesn't sound like a good idea. That sounds terrible. It just seems like a very lazy way to just be like, how do we get this character involved in things? Everything having to do with Allison makes a whole lot of no sense. I'll comment more on that as we keep going, because it's going to involve David Naughton's character. This quote, "He was a stupid man. He died a stupid death." I believe that was Emerson who said that about Craig after they found out that he was dead. He's a stupid man, and he died a stupid death. I'm sure there were a lot of people that could cover out in life, but that's what the Darwin Awards are for. Yeah. I just love that quote. Had to write it down. You know Emerson's a bad guy from the beginning, but then they throw in the whole bribery, racketeering, etc., all that stuff. And then you're just like, oh, he's not just a terrible guy who likes to assault women. He's up to a lot more stuff. You don't know exactly what he's up to. They just kind of like allude to like, oh, he's a super bad guy and he's got all his cronies around him. And they're only ever like hanging out for the most part together in the boardroom at this office. So it's just kind of like, what is he actually like? What's his cover? It was like real estate, I think, maybe. I don't know. It's not important. Why does Dunn act like Allison is some sort of problem to him when she comes to the precinct to ask him for the information on the people so she can follow up on her photos? He just needs to tell her that she can't have what she wants. That's all he needed to do. He just needed to be like, look, this is your art thing. This has nothing to do with the legal system. No, you're not getting access to this stuff. But he acts like it's some sort of big issue. I guess it's because he's like into her, which becomes obviously very clear when he goes over to her place with wine and that whole really bad scene, but like fun bad in a sense. But yeah, like he literally could have just been like, no, and I'm done with you. It's just another one of those like convenience of the writing, like, let's just move the story along type thing. Dunn's attempt at being smooth with Allison, cringy. Extremely cringy. I found it kind of fun how cringy it is. It wasn't quite to the level of that one scene in Swingers, if you know what I'm talking about, with Jon Favreau. It wasn't quite to that level, but it wasn't too far off, I would say. It wasn't too far off. Toby, trying to make a deal with Agent Spoon, tells you he's going to end up dying, either by the hands of Gailey or the hands of Emerson. Because he's putting himself in literally an impossible position. He's like, you know that Emerson would kill him if he finds out, and he probably would end up finding out that he was trying to narc on him. And Gailey's after him. So you're literally at this point like, this guy is going to die. It's just a matter of who is going to kill him. You do assume Gailey, though. I didn't assume that Agent Spoon would necessarily be Gailey, but I was picking up on the fact that the way that Agent Spoon was talking was very robotic, so it did make me think, well, maybe this is Gailey. But then again, in a lot of these types of films, people who are in law enforcement, especially people who are like agents, like FBI agents or whatever, that they are portrayed as kind of robotic, kind of emotionless. So I was wondering if maybe that was a play, but it is Gailey. I know that Dunn and Allison kiss, but there is literally no palpable chemistry. Let's just throw that all out there. Like, one of the other cringy things about the whole, like, romance thing is that there's no chemistry between David Naughton's character and the person who played Allison. Sorry, I didn't write down her name. Literally no chemistry. And so that makes it hard for people to be like, oh, yes, this makes sense. It is hilarious. I love this scene. Another one of my favorite scenes. When Agent Spoon's pecs puff out to become full-sized boobs. Because it's Gailey. But they didn't even need to show that. They didn't need it to be flat. And then it's just like, initiate, inflate, brr. It's just funny to me. I like that part because it's hilarious. But yeah, ridiculous. And then the decapitation by hand part that Toby suffers. Not wonderful, not nearly as good as the the spinner thing going through Craig, but pretty fun. I did like that. The whole like burning hand thing was a little bit odd, but then once that like the body falls away from the head and the head's like still up against the wall, that's cool. I like that. They literally just put that dude's head through a fake wall and kind of like tilted things, but talked about it in the special features. That was cool. You get the idea that Morton is just using Gailey for his own sick enjoyment. Oh, I'm sorry. I switched. Albert. It's Albert. His last name's Morton. You get the idea that Albert is just using Gailey for his own sick enjoyment to one degree. This comes across when he keeps wanting to watch the deaths of Craig and Toby. He is so obsessed with the revenge aspect of things, even more so than Gailey would. And Gailey would not want this, let's be honest. That's one of the things that kind of comes across in the film, is that Gailey probably would not want this, especially with how kind of innocent her in the cybernetic capacity acts. But yeah, you start to feel like Albert's kind of a villain in a sense, and he's getting so much enjoyment out of repeatedly watching these death scenes after Gailey's dispatched these guys. Schumann, his enthusiasm over the deaths when he's arguing with Dunn is some of my favorite acting in the movie, to be honest. I didn't write his name down, sorry. The guy who plays Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley, that guy was playing the mortician. And when he's having those like back and forths with Dunn about the cause of death, love it. That's like the best acting in the film. Some of the best, other than Bruce Davison, but some of the best acting, some of my favorite moments. Love it. So I think Gailey either crushed or shredded Oscar's dong in Oscar's death scene. Wasn't there a better way to kind of do that, though? I don't love that death. It's one of my least favorites. They kind of allude to the fact that, like, she is having sex with him, and she's maybe, like, her vagina's, like, crushing, because it's, you know, she's a robot. It's, like, crushing his dong, and then he ends up dying, because then later it looks like there was a bunch of blood in the crotch area. I don't know. I'm assuming that's what happened. But there was a better way they could have shot that for sure, or alluded to that, or just had a different death scene. I would have gone for a different death scene. It would have been a lot better, because they had some other good ones. Uh-oh, Gailey killed an innocent person, so she's no longer just seeking revenge. When it's, Allison's boss, I forget his name in this, when she kills him, rough. That sucks. Yeah. Because at that moment, like, first you're kind of rooting for Gailey, or, you know, Gailey at this point, because this is the whole revenge thing. You know, it's the assault revenge typical film narrative of, like, okay, now the revenge is happening. So you're kind of rooting for her because you're in that mode. And then someone who's innocent gets killed because I guess they needed to cover up the fact of who they were, because he saw her and was like, oh, I recognize you, and, you know, was able to kind of finger her as Gailey. But it's a moment where things start to turn, and you're like, oh, maybe this is out of control, and that makes you then start to think about Albert, and you're like, well, this is making Albert look even worse at this point, because he created this, and he's already acting a little sadistic and messed up, so yeah. I'm probably going way too deep in this film, let's be honest. Dunn turns on Allison really quick, saying that she caused Duncan's death. That was his name, her boss, Duncan. That moment I was like, geez, what just happened? For how smitten Dunn has been with Allison, for him to just lash out at her like that and be like, you're responsible for Duncan's death. It's because of you that he died, because you're sticking your nose in this stuff. Well, maybe if you didn't allow her to stick her nose in this stuff, maybe if in the first place you had ignored her and shut her down, this wouldn't be a thing, buddy. Just saying. The piano scene with Gailey saying something feels odd and isn't right gives the idea that she's starting to realize that something is off with her existence. This is the moment that she's starting to become cognizant of, wait a minute, maybe what I'm doing isn't what I should be doing in life. Starting to have more human feelings as opposed to just this robot in servitude to her brother Albert. So that's the crack in the foundation there, where you're realizing something's going to happen with her. You know, she's gonna change. She's going to come to some realization, and things are going to change. Norman is going to be killed by Gailey or Emerson. Again, he basically gets into that same situation as, I already forgot his name. It wasn't Oscar. It wasn't Craig. Other dude. The guy who was, you know, had the hot hand and then his head was on the wall. Yeah. So he ends up basically in the same situation, because he's just like, I'll go to the police, I'll tell everything, or I want to run, and Emerson's like, I'll kill you, and then he's like, well, but Gailey's gonna kill me. So then again, you know, this guy's gonna be dead, and he is dead. I do kind of like the moment when you see Emerson actually worried, though, even though he just said that he can't be touched. He has that interaction, I believe it's with Allison, where he's just like, you can't touch me, I'm untouchable, blah, blah, blah. But then when they leave, you see it on his face that he's kind of like, ugh. He does something kind of like his facial expression is kind of like, oh, yeah, I'm actually kind of worried. So it shows that vulnerability. Like, he isn't fully confident that he's going to get away with everything. That was kind of like a cool, subtle thing in the film. I do dig Norman's helicopter blade death. Really did dig that one. Reminded me of Dawn of the Dead with the zombie who gets the top of its head chopped off. It was more of Norman's head than it was of the zombie's head in Dawn of the Dead. So I'm going to give him that. It's a good death scene. The next step of becoming her own person comes when Gailey decides not to let Allison die. That's that next step. First is at the piano saying that something's like feeling off, and then it's deciding, trying, like being in that moment, living in that moment for a little bit and actually thinking things through and not letting Allison go. And this is when Albert's in her head, literally saying, let her go, because she knows too much at that point. And that shows you that Albert is going too far because this is someone innocent. And then it shows you that Gailey is changing and becoming more cognizant as a machine, becoming more like androidish, because she's like, yeah, I shouldn't kill this person. Because it's their friend. First friend. Because she asks earlier in the film if she has friends. It's a bit sad how lonely Gailey does seem. That actually does come through. You do feel a little bit bad for Gailey. So I like that touch with the film. It's a nice rock bottom to see for Emerson when he's alone in his boardroom trying to hold a meeting by himself. He's literally like talking to himself, like trying to talk to people who aren't actually there. It's a cool moment because you're just like, yeah, he's alone. He's actually scared. We already saw him crack a little bit and he knows he's not untouchable. It's a nice moment. It's the perfect moment before that final revenge ends up happening. Pretty fun flaming body scene with Emerson, especially when it's actually falling off the building. I like how they did that. And in the special features, they were talking about how they lit that guy on fire a few times. It looks impressive, but man, that's dangerous stuff. But then obviously it's like a mannequin's body that they throw off the building, which still looked good, as it was flaming. And honestly, having it be on fire while it's falling probably helped to cover up the fact that like the actual like movement wasn't right for an actual body. So it was good. Pretty fitting that the film ends with Gailey and Albert jumping to their deaths. I did like that too. I was wondering how it was going to end, and it ends on a pretty good note because here we are in the same place we were in the beginning of the film. Gailey jumps to her death again, but this time she takes Albert with her, and all this stuff is put to rest. So pretty good ending. The audio levels in this film I do think are messed up, though. At times the music is drowning out the dialogue, so there were issues with that. That's one of my biggest problems with it. The cinematography was pretty basic in this film. I think that's part of the reason I was saying it had a lot of this kind of like TV movie feel to it, because it looked like some pretty basic directing and cinematography. Gailey uses the main weakness of the scumbags in this film to lure them for the kill. Obviously that was intentional because they use sexuality to kill Gailey, and Gailey used sexuality to kill them. It's obviously in very different ways, but it's making that kind of comparison of this is how they get their comeuppance. Like, the terrible thing that they did will be the thing that gets them. It's their vice. It's their big vice. In the end, Albert used Gailey for his satisfaction, as did Emerson with his flunkies. I do think there is, whether it's intentional or not, this comparison between Gailey was used during the assault by Emerson and his flunkies, and then in death, when she's brought back, she is used again by another man, this time her brother, as a weapon for revenge. Because it wasn't even about her revenge at that point. It was about his revenge. So it's kind of like, doesn't feel right. It's kind of sick. It's kind of messed up. So, again, I probably went too deep on this review of this film, but yeah, I mean, I feel like there's more there than you would think there is. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, as an overall film, it's a 1-star film, but as a so bad it's good film, I'm going 3 stars. I was between 3 and 3.5, but I think how it presents as it is it's a 3-star, so bad it's a good film. Still enjoyed it, still will watch it again. But would love to hear your thoughts on this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you in between on it? Give me a sentence or two letting me know why. Then do me some favors. Hit subscribe to my channel. That way you can join my nerdy horror community here, which I'm trying to get growing. It's not for, purpose of making money, really. Although I do have ads on. It's a paltry something that I end up making. This is really about just having community, reaching out to community. Because where I live, there's pretty much no one I can talk to on a nerdy level about horror films. So this has been my outlet. So I love the comments. I love people joining with the subs. And yeah, hit the notification bell button if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing 3 a week. But regardless, thanks so much for checking out this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.